like a lot of enthusiasm. Does that mean there's going to be a victory coming up real soon? Then you can really make a lot of noise then, huh? But before I get into this too much, my wife is sitting down here. I think you know Carol. My granddaughter, Lisa. And our oldest son and his wife, Ronnie and Peggy, are around here someplace. Anyway, it is nice to be here. You know, I haven't been doing a lot of campaigning. Somebody asked me, am I having a good time? Yeah, I'm not involved in as much politics as I used to be. I don't have to get on an airplane every week and go up there and play some of those games. But still, I'm very much involved in the important things. And occasionally, if you find an exceptional candidate, I'll campaign. And that's why I'm here, because I believe we have an exceptional candidate. You know, many years ago when I first ran for office, I probably told this story before, I told Carol I was going to run. She said it could be a dangerous thing because I could get elected. But I explained to her that wouldn't be the case, that people aren't going to pay any attention. And her explanation was that, well, they're going to believe you and they want to hear the truth. And she may have been right, but that's one thing that we can say about our candidate for comptroller. She will tell the truth, and she will be credible, and there's no reason in the world that we shouldn't have her as the next comptroller. You know, I don't know how far Debra went in mathematics, but I do know one thing, that the only thing you have to know real well in politics is arithmetic. You know, if you understand arithmetic and you have to balance the ledger, you can go a long way. And that, of course, is what her expertise is in. And, you know, I actually think that, you know, she should be governor right now. That's what she should be. She obviously proven herself during that campaign. She impressed me because she knew the facts and the figures better than any of the other candidates. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, why don't you run for state office? And it hasn't ever been attractive to me because I didn't understand the issue. And when she campaigned and explained what she knew, she convinced me that I didn't know the issues at the state level. Other than one fact, whether it's the state level, the city council, or the federal government, the principle is liberty, and if you apply it to any level, we can't go wrong. I haven't quite figured out or remember the exact time that Debra and I met. It's been a while because she's been helping me for a long time. But one thing that she did that was impressed me very much, we're into politics, and we know how politics works, and she was working hard in Wharton County, and she became the chairman, which was very good. But you know, chairmen are supposed to be sort of real, you know, ambivalent, be for everybody and anything. But one of the first things she did was she started having educational seminars. And I thought, well, that is something else. So when I heard about that, and she says, come on over here, we want to learn more about Austrian economics, that impressed me. But that's the type of individual she is, and she's obviously very good at politics. But she was involved in our campaigns, whether it was for the Congress or for the presidential campaign or Campaign for Liberty. She was on the board for Campaign for Liberty. So she has really been involved, very close to what I have been doing, and she's been very, very helpful. So there's no doubt in my mind what kind of a job she'll do when she becomes the comptroller. I think she's going to do fantastic. But you know, there's another thing that's happening in the country that makes me excited. It's what, you know, you could say, well, aren't you finally discouraged? Look at what's happened to the country. You know, it's going to the dogs. What were the two surveys just done recently on economic freedoms? We're down to 14th. We're worse than Estonia. And then on freedom of information. We're like 42nd. I think we're behind Russia now. And it's just downhill. So how could anybody see anything positive with that? Well, it is. I always think that once a system fails and the people become aware of the failure, it's an opportunity to replace it. And I think that is what's going to happen. And how is it going to be replaced? Even though I spent a lot of years working in the Congress and working on national issues, I never had this belief, and I still don't have the belief that, well, all we need is 5 more, 10 more, 15 more members of Congress, and we're going to vote positive things, and it'll go through the Senate, and the President's going to sign these things. And if you look at what has happened over the years, whether you had a Republican or a Democrat Congress or a President, they never followed through. But something is going on because of this failure. The people are starting to wake up, and the people are saying we've had enough. And guess what? It's at the state level, and that is where the action should be, and that is why we need good people at the state level. The whole issue that I think goes around what the states should be. The states should have been more like, it was intended by the founders to bring the states together as a loose-knit group of, quote, countries together. But of course that didn't happen. Soon it was a national government after the Civil War especially, and then the repeal of the 17th Amendment. It de-emphasized the importance of the states. And I think that's wrong. I think what we should have is a de-emphasis on the federal government and the international government that's trying to take over. We talk a lot about the monetary policy, and obviously we're in a lot of trouble there, and I do believe the dollar is doomed and something will replace it, and we're making a lot of progress there. At the same time, the enemy knows this too. They know it's going to fail, and they're preparing for an international currency under the IMF, a paper currency run by the United Nations. And those are the individuals who are absolutely opposed to what we're talking about, because they're talking about worldwide authoritarianism held in the hands of the few, and we're talking about a society that recognizes individual liberty, and if you're going to have government, it should be local and unregulated from this federal government. So I think that's really our opportunity. This is the reason why we should be working very hard at the state level.
Come on.
But we've seen some real solid progress in the area of nullification. Now, nullification is a principle well known in our early history, but then it was ignored. And they actually believed in it, but because people became complacent, they didn't use it. And you could go to Washington and pass a law, and the president sign it and saying this is to clarify nullification, and this is how you can use it. That's not going to happen. But there can be something called de facto nullification, and that is what's happening. The more failures that you're going to see in Washington, D.C., and the more bankruptcy where they become totally inept, the people are going to finally just say, I've had enough, we're going to do it on our own, we're going to take care of ourselves, and when the laws become intrusive, we're going to pass state laws to actually overcome the federal laws. Now, of course, Texas has already made an effort to live up to the Constitution about what legal tender ought to be. Legal tender under the Constitution should only be gold and silver as legal tender. Now, Texas evidently now, it has been expressed, it has moved in that direction by buying gold and saying that they should at least have this as a backup. I think this is an excellent idea, and this was in spite of the fact that we didn't have all our people there. We had good members of the state legislature and moved in this direction. So this to me is fantastic, because the federal government, you know, is not going to all of a sudden change until the very end, and then we have this contest between the internationalists. But there's another area that the federal government has been overly intrusive. I've spent a lot of time at the national level condemning all the undeclared, unconstitutional, useless wars around the world that ought to be stopped. But there's one thing certain, that under the conditions of running an empire, civil liberties will always be undermined, and that is what we're seeing. Though the war overseas leads to an attitude here at home. It used to be that if you'd have a major war, and we made declarations, there was abuse of civil liberties, but generally they backed off after the war was over. But today we have this attitude of a perpetual war on the world, the global war on terrorism. And that means they have license, because when you're at war, you can undermine you. We're supposed to roll over and sacrifice our liberties. And that, unfortunately, has been what's going on. But the attitude has been there for a while anyway. We have a tax system that compels us to roll over too often about the abuse of our liberties, the intrusiveness, the keeping of records, being guilty until proven innocent. So there has been way too much invasion of our privacy over the tax code. But what other area has been going on since this particular war was expanded dramatically in the early 1970s under a Republican president? So that's 40 years, and that's the war on drugs. We don't need this national war on drugs. We need people to assume responsibility for themselves and have states mandate. But this war has been going on a long time, but what have some of the states done now? And I hear it's starting to move into Texas, and we have 2 states that actually said that you can use marijuana, and the feds look like they're going to have to give up, otherwise they're going to have to put 10 million people in prison. So the system has failed, it's fallen apart. There is becoming a nullification of those laws. I think this is very, very good. Now, does that mean there are no problems with drugs? No, we have a horrendous problems with drugs and addictions and all this, but most of them are prescription drugs. But the issue on what the states should do and the federal would do and what their motivation isn't so much the harm that might come, say, from the use of drugs or substances or eat too much or whatever. The issue is freedom of choice, making these decisions and whose responsibility it is. So the drug is not the issue as much as the assumption of the responsibility. And I would say that just as it should be in education, just as it should be for our children, teaching them good habits and why bad habits aren't good for them, eating habits, the whole work, where's the responsibility? It should be on the parent, certainly not on the federal government coming in. So I'm delighted to see this happening. But you know, in one sense, one complication of the war on drugs I always was amazed about, and that was the fact that the war on drugs really started by tax in the late 1930s. Prohibition didn't work. They repealed prohibition, but they had to give these jobs to a few government agents, so they had to go after have this DEA, and so that has been around a long time on this drug war. But what amazed me is a consequence of that, not before World War II, but after World War II, they decided, well, there's this marijuana, we can't trust the people, what with that, they might smoke it or something. But we have this other plant called hemp, We got to get rid of hemp because it looks a little bit like marijuana, but you can't smoke hemp. But so they make marijuana or hemp illegal. But isn't it utterly amazing that right now the states have dealt with this and shown that the states are going to speak out on the marijuana issue, but it's about time somebody, I can imagine if a bill came to the U.S. Congress, it said, you know, it's time that the people are allowed to raise hemp. It's a commercial product. We begged and pleaded people to raise this stuff in World War II, and the founders of the country, that was a good crop that they had. But why do we allow this to happen? Why don't we just demand a little bit of common sense? That shouldn't be too difficult of a question. That shouldn't be too unreasonable to ask. A little common sense would go a long way to improving our conditions.
There you go.
This, of course, is the one reason why we need to get Debra there. She's going to be checking the books. And maybe a little bit good common sense in adding and subtracting might solve a lot of our problems. But it's the voice also, you know, on what is happening. Who knows what she might find when she has access, you know, to these books that you can't ever tell. Maybe some things were done politically in Austin as well as they were done in Washington, which I suspect could be the case. But there definitely is a move, whether it's the money issue, whether it's on the drug issue, whatever. The people are standing up and speaking out, and local officials are. Philosophically, I believe that one of the main responsibilities of any public official outside of Washington, the #1 responsibility is protecting the citizens that they represent from illegal, unconstitutional intrusion by the federal government. That, of course, is you know, something that would improve things so much. We actually, I can find worse states than Texas, let me tell you. Texas has done good traditions, but we can't assume that we can't do a lot better. And this requires understanding economics. You know, right now we have the failure of the federal government level and all the lies that they tell us about how wonderful the economy is doing now, and yet the middle class is getting wiped out. Unemployment rates are much higher. The CPI is much higher than they tell us. It's better to think Detroit if you want to be concerned about what's happening. The extreme consequence of progressive politics and progressive economic thinking is Detroit. I mean, it's spending, debt, unions, the whole works. Bankrupted that city. It is bankrupt, and they don't even believe for a minute that the answer is in freedom. People up there are still saying what we need is more help. So they say, well, you know, they believe in redistribution. Oh, I understand Texas is doing a little bit better than Michigan, and Houston's doing better than Detroit. They're going to come and say, well, you better help us out. So I don't doubt for a minute that when things get really bad financially, because they're going to get worse than they were in 08 and 09, that what is left they're going to come for. This is why people rightfully should be concerned about pension funds and whatever, because the government can very easily, they're doing it in other countries, they've done it here, is tell you what you can do with your funds. They'll have big capital controls, and they might say, yeah, you can invest your IRA funds in the 401ks as long as you buy treasury bills, and they're such a good deal, you know. Put them away and keep your money. So this is what we face, but it's back to the one issue, and for me, it's the issue of liberty. Because if we understand that, the founders understood this pretty darn well, but even though shortly thereafter, we started drifting from that, and these last 100 years have been very bad. But in the last 10 years or 15 years, we've seen some improvements. Improvements not in Washington. That's a disaster. But we should be prepared for what's going to come because of that disaster, and that's where the progress is being made. I mentioned that Debra was involved in economic education early on. She still believes in that, and that's ultimately, you know, the solution to our problems. Because right now, I get multiple invitations on a routine basis to go around the world. Been to Chile, going to go to Brazil, they're trying to get me to Spain. And these are groups, they're just desperate to hear the ideas. Their groups are there, they're small, but the seeds are being sown. The internet is fantastic. The messages are being spread around the world, and this failure of our system is on our doorstep. The 20th century was the failure of fascism, of the Nazi types, and the failure of communism, the authoritarian system, the worst conceivable. That is the message of the 20th century, and we didn't even have to have a nuclear war to prove how bad off they were. And that system is gone, and we should be grateful for it. But the Keynesian interventionism, the fiat money, the regulations, excessive taxation, the belief that borrowing is a good idea, it's failing too, and it's going to fail. And the big question is, what is going to replace it? There are two choices. One, the only way they can handle the people under that type of a disaster is total authoritarianism, total dictatorship. They will have to come in with an iron fist, and you'll see the Department of Homeland Security exploding even more as it is now. I'll tell you what, the founders knew something about Department of Homeland Security, and that was the Second Amendment. We're living in exciting times. I find it exciting and interesting. I just wished it weren't so serious, because I believe we're going to see and witness the collapse of a system. I'm fearful of what might happen, but I'm encouraged to know that the seeds have been planted out there. And it hasn't been, just last week or last year. People want to give me a bit of credit for some of the work that I've done. But mine is just sort of fell into place with what was done by the intellectual communities, by Austrian economics, and what's been done on the internet, what the kind of work that you've all done. So it's come together, but it is true that today, a lot more people know a lot more about the Federal Reserve today than they've ever have in the last 100 years. So the opportunity is going to be there, and the more we have in office, whether it's the State House and State Senate, Comptroller, and whatever, the better off we're going to be. Because if what I suggest could happen does happen, that means that if you don't have something organized at the local level, it will be more authoritarianism and more anarchy where everybody's going their own way. But I think the most important thing is to understand why liberty solves the problems. We as libertarians and conservatives and constitutionalists have always suffered from the fact that we come across as not caring about people. We don't have any humanitarian instincts. And you hear it every night on the television about, the Republicans this, Republicans that, conservatives don't care, these extreme conservatives, if you're in a Tea Party movement, you're extreme and you really don't care about anybody. So this is a tough one politically, because the middle class is shrinking, and the government is getting bigger. And this is the reason that we have a big task before us. But believe me, it's out there. The message is spreading. We can't give up, which means there's a short time until this primary election is. No giving up. Everybody has to work real hard and then have a really great victory party. A victory party, not only a victory party for Debra and the campaign, about a victory party for liberty and give the answers to this system of Keynesian economic interventionism and authoritarian warfareism. It's ending, and we're going to offer them a solution to those problems, and it's a good old-fashioned American solution. It's called liberty. Thank you very much.